All right, looks like we have a lot of people, a few people still maybe coming in, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Jenny, and my husband and I own Wacoma Bookstore in Hood River, Oregon. I'm gonna do a quick introduction. There's Jen and Jean are gonna talk about the book, and then towards the end, there'll be questions. So feel free, there's a Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to drop in questions there if you have any questions, and then we'll go through those about 15 minutes towards the end of this. All right, so I'm very excited for this. Jen lives here in Hood River, Oregon, and she thinks of her work as opening a kind of map to study the well-worn places where storytelling intersects with health. She also really enjoys maps, traveling the world with her family, and as a doctoral student at Washington State University, nerding out over global health data. Finding the Vein is her first book. And then Jean was born and raised in New York City. She's the author of several novels, including You Should Have Known, which was adapted for HBO as The Undoing, starring Nicole Kidman, Hugh Grant, and Donald Sutherland. Admission, which was adopted as the 2013 film of the same name, starring Tina Fey, Lily Tomlin, and Paul Rudd. The Devil and Webster, The White Rose, The Sabbath Day River, and A Jury of Her Peers, as well as a middle-rate reader, Interference Powder, and a collection of poetry, The Properties of Breath. She also has, coming out in 2021, so in May, this next month, The Plot, which actually, if you guys are familiar with our store, we do Indie Next list all the time, and we always have a display in our window. Hers is part of, this is part of the May Indie Next list, which is really exciting, which means booksellers across the US have recommended her book quite a bit. So I'm just gonna go ahead and let Jean and Jen talk about their books.
Hey, hi everyone. Hi Jen. Hi Oregon. You know, Jen, we should tell people like how we know each other, because it's not often that we get to say this out loud. You know, it's an unusual thing, right? So thank you. We met on a boat. Somebody
That's
said
right.
We didn't meet on a boat. We met on a ship.
It was a ship.
That's right.
Not a boat. That's right.
It was
yes,
a ship.
I'll tell how we met. We were both participants on a semester at sea voyage. It was 2012, and it was spring, and I was working as the shipboard nurse. Basically, I was like the nurse working in the clinic for the faculty, staff, and the faculty and staff families, which was your role, right, Jean?
Well, I was going to say I wasn't really a participant. I was more of an appendage. I was a faculty nurse. I had no official role at all. Do you mean there was a separate nurse for the faculty and staff and families?
And students.
And students, yes.
Yes.
So you took care of everybody.
Well, actually, there was a separate nurse for the crew and a separate physician for the crew, which was interesting. It was kind of a, you know, it was an upstairs, downstairs kind of a vibe going on. But actually, with the crew that was there, we decided that we would all just take care of everybody. So even though traditionally, like the crew had hours that they could go to the clinic, and the students and staff and faculty had hours that they could go to the clinic, we all decided we would just all help each other. So we all saw everybody, which was great, because that was a chance to work with the physicians and nurses of the crew who were from the Philippines. So
and what kinds of things did you have to treat with 700 college students on a ship in the middle of
well, I did a talk at the end of the voyage all about this, but you probably remember that most of it, there was a lot of gastrointestinal distress. Some of that was just seasickness from being on a ship for 5 months. There was also a fair amount of food poisoning. We stopped. Maybe we should brag about all the places we went. We started in Florida, and we ended in California.
We're not going to brag about Florida, though. We're going to brag about Florida.
We stopped in Dominica and in Brazil and in Ghana and South Africa
That's where I got sick.
Yes, and everybody else. And then everybody who wasn't sick in Ghana got sick in India and Singapore. Nobody got sick in Singapore. And then we went to Vietnam and China and Hong Kong and Japan. I might have left somebody out there.
No, I don't think so. And then Hawaii, we stopped in Hawaii.
Hawaii, and then back home again. So we got to be friends on the ship because we just did. We had kids. Our kids were on the ship.
That's right. That's right. But we were just saying before the webinar started, my son was 12, and during the course of that voyage, which took about 3 months, 3.5 months, I watched him go from playing with the kids to playing with the college students. And it was fascinating. You know, I got to see him sort of detach from one group and join the next group, and suddenly he was sort of talking TV comedy with a college student from, you know, Pittsburgh, and it was really quite moving to see that happen. And of course we had him, you know, auditing college classes. That was all the school he got. That seemed to go okay too. I mean, he couldn't like write papers or anything like that, but he was able to follow along on the reading. So it's a very important thing for him. I wrote a book. I wrote a lot of a book. You Should Have Known, that became The Undoing, was written on that ship. And I loved it. I also lost like 25 pounds. Most of the people on the ship gained weight because they were so bored and all there was to eat was rice and potatoes. I was so nauseated the whole time. And I was gaining a lot of weight. Anyway, that is neither here nor there. Well, I remember talking with you even back then about writing, and you said you were interested in it. And, you know, a lot of people say that. I want to write a book. I feel, you know, called to write fiction. But guess what? They don't do it that often. So I'm so happy for you that you know, made this transition. And I mean, I'd love to hear what finally got you to write this book. Oh,
okay. Well, I was thinking when you were talking about writing a book on the ship, how I did not write a book on the ship because I was like really busy on the ship taking care of patients. And in fact, that's kind of my life. I am really busy taking care of patients. I'm a nurse practitioner. Some of you that are out there maybe only know me that way. And even though I really wanted to write a book, I didn't have the bandwidth to do so until I took a year off. I was able to take a year off from work. Tom's job took us to Ottawa, Canada for a year. And during that time, I looked into whether I could work as a nurse in Canada, and it seemed like there were a lot of hoops to jump through. And when I realized that it was going to be too much of a hassle to get licensed and whatnot up there, I said, well, all right, I'm not going to work. What am I going to do? I'm going to write a book. I've read hundreds, if not 1,000 or more detective stories. So I know I'll write something easy. I'll write a detective story, which turns out to be the opposite of easy. I don't know if it's easy to write any novel, but I will definitely say it was not easy to write a kind of an intricately plotted detective story where all the pieces have to line up and everybody has to be in the right place at the right time, or suddenly there are these giant holes in the plot. But anyway, it took me the better part of that year in Canada to write the first draft of this book. So that's how it actually got written.
So in reading all of those detective stories yourself, I mean, you must have found it easy to see the difference between a good one and a bad one, right? You knew when you were reading a bad one.
I'm not sure that I do. I kind of enjoy them all. I mean, not to say I can't tell when a book isn't working. I mean, I think I can. But I don't have, I mean, I read a lot of, I don't mean to say I only read detective fiction. I really do read a lot. I read a lot of fiction. I read literary fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction too. But maybe it's because there's something that's so enjoyable about reading a mystery that is resolved at the end that maybe gave me the delusion that that type of story is easy to write. Maybe it's because they're easy to enjoy as a reader. So I sort of thought it would be easier than it was.
You know, I find that people who love mysteries and detective stories, they read them, you know, the way I used to smoke cigarettes, like end to end. Put one down, pick up the next one. Yeah. There must be some sort of gene for this, because I've read very few detective stories. I find that, I mean, I gravitate more to books that are about why something happens than who did what. But my best friend, who's been my reader by which I mean my designated reader, the person who reads all my work and whom I trust above all else and who's brilliant, she reads them like she's never without one. And so every now and then she'll say, you got to read this one, you got to read that one. But it's not, I mean, Your Mystery was like the first one I've read in maybe decades.
Oh.
A long time. I was thinking, you know, gosh, maybe I've given this genre too short shrift. Maybe I should, because it was so much fun to read, and there was so much humor in it as well. There were times that I was like actually like laughing out loud. You really found a way to get a lot of that in. But maybe before we really delve into the novel, maybe you'd like to read a little bit from it?
Oh, is this a good time to do that? Okay. I will. Okay, well, here it is.
Okay.
Finding the Vein. I thought that I would read from early in the book so as not to provide any spoilers of the plot, and also to give voice to a character who he doesn't get to be around for very long. So to set the scene, the story takes place at Heritage Camp, which is a summer camp for adoptees. After the trivia and the campfire songs, the mail was distributed and the campers were quiet for a short time, reading their letters or gazing at their friends' mail rather than their own empty hands. Paul washed his face off in the lake and played a medley of pop songs on his clarinet. When he was finished, Ty announced, "Adoptees Got Talent is over, ladies and gentlemen." "But what about the ghost stories?" a little girl asked. Paul recognized little Eliza, attired in her usual outfit, shorts, a t-shirt, and fairy wings. The wings were growing floppy and ragged. "No ghost stories, Tinkerbell, not on my watch. Under 12s to your cabins. Everyone else to the lodge for the dance party at 11. Stay with your buddy." Very quickly the campers began to disperse and head up the path. Their noisy procession was a medley of bright sweatshirts, ponytails, sandals, and sleek otter-brown heads. Paul coughed. The camp nurse, a tall, thin woman with blonde hair who stood out in the crowd, hung back. "Paul, are you okay?" "Yeah, thanks, Genevieve. It's just the wood smoke. It bothers me sometimes." "I'll be at the lodge doing night meds," she said, "in case you need me." "Thanks," he said, relieved. She didn't seem mad at him at all. She turned to Sophie, looking slightly worried. She always looked that way when speaking to her daughter. Paul had noticed it before. "Aren't you coming up, Sophie?" she asked. "I'll be there in a minute." "Don't dilly-dally, sweetheart." "Mom." Genevieve looked reluctant to go, but a voice from up the path called, "Nurse, we need some first aid here," and she hurried away, glancing back. Sophie rolled her eyes. They were green today, and smiled at Paul. Paul disassembled his clarinet and stowed it, snapping the case shut as the counselors in training doused the campfire and then chased each other up the path, hurling marshmallows and laughing. One grazed Paul's ear. He picked it up and fired it, popping it neatly off the back of Nathan's retreating head. Sophie stepped close to him as he stood up. "I like that song you played." She sang the melody quietly. She was off-key, and he suppressed a smile. "Miley Cyrus," he said lightly, stepping back. "Why do people like pop music?" She stepped closer again. "It helps them with their feelings, the ones they don't know how to say out loud." "Sophie," he should move away. He didn't. "Paul," she said, gently mocking. "No one is watching." She put her hand on the back of his neck and kissed him. To reach, she had to stand on tiptoe, which meant balancing on one leg while the other, the prosthetic one, rested on its toes slightly behind her. The position was awkward, and it canted her forward slightly so that he thought she was falling and reached out to steady her, dropping his clarinet case. But she was not falling. She was used to the imbalance. When he reached for her, she reached back, and they were suddenly pressed together, which felt amazing and was exactly what he had tried to avoid, even as the heat gathered in his stupid, stupid body that didn't care about the rules. There were several reasons why kissing her was not okay. But she started it, his body argued. Her mouth was soft, and her hair smelled like flowers, along with smoke and burnt marshmallows. Then he heard a little noise in the woods. Was it a twig snapping? A bird? He squinted into the darkness and thought for a second he saw a green T-shirt moving through the trees. The CITs wore green. It jolted him back to reality. He put a hand on her shoulder and stepped back. Sophie, I don't want to be that guy. Is it about the video? She asked, looking down. I told you, I don't do that anymore. Why are you being so... He hoped she wouldn't say what Ty had said. So fucking good all the time. People seemed to think that. He wished it were true. I know that. I'm not judging you, Sophie. He spoke quickly to stop her from saying it. And I deleted it. I told him to do the same thing. Is that what you two were arguing about? No, look, it doesn't matter. He took another step back and tried to focus on the crunch of the pine needles, the scent of smoke in the air, anything but Sophie's puzzled and yearning expression. He told himself, probably for the 1,000th time, that he was doing the best thing. I'm leaving my phone anyway, when I go. Seriously? You're still planning to go? Yeah, Sophie, he tried to say it gently. I am. Now she was the one to step back, her face turned hard and angry. It's so stupid. This was Tanya's idea, wasn't it? No, he said, frustrated. It's about me. Nobody else has to understand. Which was a good thing, he thought, since nobody did, apart from Tanya. But he didn't want to think about Tanya now either. Let's go up, okay? He said. I need my inhaler. He coughed again, feeling the slight wheeze from the smoke. Their flip-flops slapped the dark path that wound through the woods, past the darkened infirmary and the younger kids' cabins. As they approached the lodge, a huge log building, they moved apart. The air pulsed with the thump of the bass line as dance music emanated from the lodge. Suddenly, Paul wanted to dance with Sophie. It would be okay just to dance. He didn't really want anyone else to put their arms around her, smell her flowery shampoo, feel her little breasts pressed against them. He wanted that off-kilter feeling as she moved into him, just one last time. I'll leave it there, I think.
Oh, let me put my video back on. Great. That brought it all back. But as we were saying before we started, that you stopped right before a truly beautiful passage, a passage that made me kind of stop reading and say, that was good. I mean, it's not giving too much away, I think, to say that this passage describes a death. It's very hard to write about death because we've never experienced it. We don't know what it's like, but it was a very powerful and beautiful passage. Of course, the death sets the plot in motion. And in a sense, this is like a classic suspense novel in that it begins with a small act of violence, in this case, the death that's about to happen shortly after the passage that you read. And by the time the story is over, we've gone global. We've gone from a local event to a global event, involving, international criminality, basically, but also very deep questions about, what it is to be in the world, really, and what our family relationships are, and what parenthood is, and what we owe our parents. And there are a lot of very deep questions in this book. So obviously there's a lot in here that you've thought about for a long time. So I'm curious, did you begin with these questions, or did the questions sort of begin to, weave their way into the story as you started writing the story?
Well, I want to make sure in a while we get back to that question about writing about parenthood and these issues of family relationships, because that's something that you write so beautifully about. And thank you for making my novel sound so good that I feel like people now are going to really want to pick it up and read it. But actually, the place that I started from with this novel was a character named Isaac. Isaac is one of the protagonists. He's a kid at camp, basically. He's 16. And he came to me almost as a fully formed character. He just popped into my imagination. Maybe this is a good time to mention that I was working at a camp that is similar to Heritage Camp, although I should probably say that Heritage Camp is not really anything like that camp, because Holt Camp is wonderful and a very safe place. But I was working at a camp for adoptees, which my kids were all attending, and I was enjoying watching how the kids ran around together. They really all felt they seemed to feel comfortable, kind of that feeling of being with your people, like your people who can relate to you. And there was a lot of joy and a lot of sense of belonging in these. Probably all summer camps have that to a certain extent. They get together, once a year, but like the friendships just pick up where they left off. And I thought about what would it be like to be there and be a kid and still feel like you don't fit in and still feel wrong. And as I was thinking about that, this kid Isaac just came to me. So really, the story started with Isaac, this character, and I think really detective fiction, even though it can be very procedural and very technical, the reason I think people love it and they love series of detective fiction has to do with the characters. So for me, it all started with the character, and my favorite detective stories also, are really about the character. They start with the character. The plot is something that's kind of driven by the people in it. It's not something that happens from the outside, I guess.
Well, you have two great detectives in this book, and they have a great relationship also, and they tease each other and they don't take each other too seriously. And a lot of the humor actually comes from Detective Wu. But he was hilarious.
Oh, thanks.
My cat has just joined me. So stop crawling at me. And we'll say a little bit more about Isaac. I mean, there's a lot that we're not going to say about Isaac. But Isaac is a very unusual character, and he has a particular task this summer. He's trying to get comfortable within himself. He's got a lot of adjusting to do. And he's chosen to come back to a place, to this camp where he's been a camper before. He's made a very specific decision to go back rather than to go somewhere else and start over.
Yeah.
What lies behind that, without saying too much about it?
Well, Isaac is a beautiful, complicated person, and he's also a brave person, and he's got some stuff going on, but he also has a lot of support. He's got parents that support him. He has a therapist, and I'm kind of, I don't want to say too much about
I'm
that.
You in there.
Yeah.
No, that's not good. He also likes to climb trees.
He has a gift.
He almost has a compulsion to climb trees.
Yeah, he has a gift for climbing trees, for sure. Yeah, he's had to run away from bullies some, so he's learned that the best way is up. So he's good at climbing trees, which comes in handy.
It does come in handy sort of as a plot device as well, as something that shows him as a unique character. And he has speaking of unique, he's got a very unique friend named Hal, who's really like a priceless character with an awesome SAT vocabulary.
Yeah.
Which is going to see him well into the college of his choice, I'm sure. Yes. Can you talk a little bit about Hal? Hal doesn't maybe have quite so many secrets as Isaac.
Yeah. No, he's got some secrets for sure, but Hal is he's definitely a genius. I did envision Hal and Isaac as a Holmes and Watson sort of pairing. So the story is told by Isaac, who isn't the one who figures everything out. So you get Isaac sort of catching up as he goes along and narrating the tale in kind of a Watson type of a way. Hal also, I don't want to say a whole lot about, except that he started with the sunglasses. That's how he got started as a character, with these shiny sunglasses, and then he developed from there. You mentioned Detective Wu, and I kind of want to mention something about Detective Wu, if that's okay, because he's a character who was inspired by a very specific person. And maybe in the chat we could take a poll of how many people were fans of the TV show Grimm from in Portland. If there are any Grimm fans, maybe you can mention it in the chat. Oh yes, we got some of them. Oh, we got someone who was an extra in that.
Great. You know this show? What is it?
Grimm is no longer happening, but it's worth going back and watching. It's a paranormal detective show that's set in Portland, Oregon, and it's the most Portland show you can imagine. And there is a character who is Officer Wu. And so the Wu in my book is not the same person as the Wu from Grimm, but he was inspired by Officer Wu. And perhaps perhaps when the show Grimm ended, Wu was looking for a job, and maybe he came to this position. Who knows?
Okay. All right. Well, I have to admit, I am not an Oregonian. I've only been to Oregon maybe 3 times. Love it there, though. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I don't know that, but I do watch Portlandia. I have watched Portlandia. I get some East Coast credit for that, I hope.
You get some credit.
So, but like I said before, there's a lot going on in this book, and there are some very deep questions and hard questions about adoption in particular. Adoption is something that you're obviously intimately acquainted with. You have adopted kids. You've been a nurse in a camp for adopted kids. We've talked about this issue years ago, and there is a question that is at the core of this story and the setting, and it comes up a few times, and it's not a spoiler to say this, but it has to do with whether adopted, it pains me to even put this into words, but since you put it into words, I'm going to say it, are adopted kids real kids? I mean, do the parents love them as if they were their own? And this is a provocative question that different characters pose, and the kids themselves seems to be at the core of their concerns as well. So how much was this something that you wanted to focus on and bring the novel sort of to revolve around?
Yeah, it's interesting that you pulled that question out. It's a question that's posed by a character. Actually, it's posed by Wu, who sort of poses a lot of provocative questions. But I didn't really think of it as a theme of the story, because in my mind, there's absolutely no question that parenting is parenting, and that adoptive parents. I mean, I don't have any biological children, but I am 100% sure that there is no parent out there who could tell me they love their kid more than I love my kids. I mean, that's just impossible. So that's not a question that's in my mind. But I do think that it's a question that is in the minds of people on the fringes of adoption, and I think it's a question that people. I mean, it's really more about what is the meaning of parenting. What's the meaning of being a parent? What's the meaning of being somebody's kid? This book contains all kinds of parenting. I mean, there's some really good parenting. There's some really pretty bad parenting. There's some abusive parenting that happens. And then it also gets at a little bit the issue of what is it like to parent a child that was taken away from you, perhaps when you didn't want that, when you weren't looking for that. So adoption there's always a painful story behind every adoption. I'm not saying that my experience with adoption has been painful, the opposite, but if we only think about the sort of happy, happy, joy, joy, oh, I have my kid, I'm such a happy parent now, it's a disservice, because there's a lot of loss and pain kind of behind every adoption, because there's always a separation that precedes that. I feel unbelievably lucky to have been able to have my family and my specific kids through adoption, but I know that adoption is complicated, and it's not all happy for everybody.
Yeah, well, in your afterward, you talk about the triangle of the adoption process involving, the birth parent, the adopted parent, and the child. And I don't remember exactly what you said, but you said that every act of adoption begins with something bad. I mean, pain. It's a painful event. So it's it's very, very complicated, and I try not to respond to like nasty reader mail, but I once got the most bizarre query through, I think, Goodreads, accusing me of being anti-adoption.
Oh, really?
And I was so enraged. This was having to do with something, I think, related to my novel Admission.
Yeah.
And I really let loose on this. I think it's still on Goodreads. You can list your questions, but I was furious about it. The only other time I've been furious about such a question is when I hope I'm not offending anybody by saying this, but a Catholic magazine gave me a positive review for a novel because I was anti-abortion.
Oh.
Excuse me, I am not anti-abortion. Like to make that misreading really required a very special mind, very special, ignorant, poorly read mind. But I mean, again, you try not to respond to these things, but I was so enraged that I had to respond to that. So.
Well, I think that Admission is a beautiful novel, and the way that it treats all writers, we have a nerve, right? Putting ourselves into the feet of somebody else. But it's such a sensitive portrayal of a woman who has placed a child for adoption. Yeah. And what that felt like I just thought that was incredible, how empathetic that character, with such empathy, that character was written. Everyone should read Admission, by the way, if you haven't.
Oh, thank you. Admission is a favorite. Well, they're all there. They're like your children. You can't pick. But because it was adapted for a woman, an actor known for comedy, the film really skewed toward comedy. It was not a comedy. Neither was You Should Have Known a Whodunit. I didn't even know who did it in the TV show. I had no idea. It had nothing to do with what I'd written. But that's why they call it adaptation. So because you're now one of us, you're now a novelist, there's a little ritual we have to undertake here. I have to initiate you into the 3 questions you're going to be asked for the rest of your life. You've probably already been asked them.
Okay.
Are you ready for them?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, the first question is, where do you get your ideas? You're going to be asked this every time you talk about your book, go into a bookstore, you're introduced as a writer. You will be asked this question. Where do you get your ideas? Are you ready to answer this question?
Yes.
Okay.
I get them from all over the place.
That's good. That's pretty good. You can start with that.
Okay.
Stephen King has given us the great answer to this question. So if you ever, want to vary your response, you are entitled to use Stephen King's answer. His answer is Utica, New York. That's where you get your ideas.
Okay.
And actually where I am right now is about 45 minutes from Utica, New York. So every time I'm driving around and I pass a sign that says Utica, I take a picture and I send to my friends, just getting some ideas. So that's the big question. You're going to be asked that so many times. You're going to want to puke, but luckily you're a nurse, so you know how to handle that. Second question is, it's only slightly less annoying than the first question, is what is your process?
That I can answer.
Okay,
That's
good.
easy. I have a very specific process.
Okay, good.
So once every 40 years, I take a sabbatical and I go live in a place that's too cold to go outside, and then I write a novel.
Okay.
So far,
so
it's been
do nothing.
It's been a complete success so far.
Okay.
100%.
So you don't do anything on a day-to-day basis because you're busy with your other job. And then every couple of years you go to a place where you can't go outside, and then you write a novel.
Right.
That's a very good answer. I haven't heard that one yet.
Well, I think
anybody who talks about yoga, stretching, and breathing, and going for a 30-mile run every morning, you're allowed to just punch them, because that's like really annoying. That's so
okay.
annoying. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And the third question you're going to be asked all the time is, what are you writing now?
What am I writing now? Well, I've been trying to write some blog posts and some mini book reviews that go on my website, and I also write little book reviews for my Instagram. I'm writing. I just wrote an academic paper for school because I'm working on this graduate program in nursing. So that's a completely different kind of writing, and it really had me tearing my hair out. And actually, I'm going to admit that my professor told me that I needed to go to the Graduate Writing Center and get some help to get my paper, in good shape. So that was very humbling.
Oh,
so scholarly writing is a bit different. But actually, I have two other novel drafts that are sitting in my computer, and I do hope to work on them. They're one of them is a sort of a sequel to this. It's not a sequel, but it picks up one of the minor characters from this novel, who's a nurse, Mikey's friend Rachel, who has a small part to play in solving this mystery. And she becomes embroiled in something that's going on in the Columbia River Gorge here in Oregon, and Mikey kind of is called in to help with that. So that's one. The other is a completely different type of story, sort of a coming-of-age novel that takes place on Cape Cod back in the 1970s. So I have stuff, but I'm not devoting a lot of time to working on it right now, to be perfectly honest.
Well, you have to wait.
May I turn this question around to you, though, Jean? What is you're a professional novelist. This is your life. So what do you do, and where do you get your ideas?
I pray to my cat Peter. This is my cat Peter, and he tells me what I'm going to write. I have done everything from thank you, Alexandra. Peter says hello. Yeah. Peter is a great writer's cat. He's completely selfish. He's totally hedonistic. And now he's quite old and cranky. So it's a perfect combination. I've done everything from think about an idea for 20 years before writing the first line to what happened with the plot, which was a very unusual event in my life and was written in 3.5 months. Which usually sounds like not a good recommendation for a book, but I think in many ways it's the best book I've ever written. So, like my novel, The Sabbath Day River, and my novel, The White Rose, literally 20 years for each of them. I was thinking about those books. And then something happened and it was time to start. But what happened with the plot, I'd been working on a different novel, a very different novel. I hope that's a good thing. I love John Irving, but it wasn't quite working. And I'd gone several rounds with my editor in which she basically said, I'm not buying it yet because it's not done. And this happened a couple of times. And the second time was a year ago in January 2020. Remember what that was like? Well, I was the only person I knew in January 2020 who was scared. I mean, I was really scared about this virus I was reading about in China. And I've read a lot of books about viruses, and I was very, very scared. And I was depressed because I was in my editor's office and she wasn't buying my book. And in the middle of this very charged situation, I kind of upchucked this whole idea that I had for a different novel. And she loved it. So she told me, why don't you write this new novel, put the other one aside, and you need a little distance from it. And then the lockdown happened. And I was in this pretty remote place in upstate New York. And all I had to do was write this novel. Yes, and it was cold, so that goes along with your, but also I was scared and I was furious. I was absolutely furious. And it was just an incredibly focusing thing. And this book just poured out. And it needed very little revision. So it was written in 3.5 months. And I'm very, very happy with it. Yeah, Peter, you're obscuring the books. You have to, yeah, I'm not gonna tell him to move. You tell him to move. So that's the story of the plot. But before we go to questions, I have one more question, and that is, I'm interested in this library writers project that was involved in the publication of your book. Can you tell us what it is and how it works?
I can. Well, I can't say a whole lot about it, really. My experience with it was I wrote this book. I really didn't try to sell it. I sent it to two publishers, and it was rejected, and I self-published it and submitted it to a contest at the Multnomah Library. It was called the Multnomah Library Writers Project, and people, read it. It was selected as a featured book from this contest. And then Ooligan came along and plucked it off the e-shelves from obscurity and said, "Hey, we want to publish it. Would you mind, letting us have it? Would you do some revisions?" They gave me a year of extremely professional editing and support, and did things like turn out this absolutely gorgeous cover. But they also helped me with sensitivity reads to make sure that my writing was not going to be offensive. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful process. So anyone who's a writer who wants to get their work out there should check out the Multnomah Library Writers Project and submit, especially Black, Indigenous, people of color. They are really hoping to represent writers from that community more. So that's my little pitch.
This is a good story about small presses and small kind of place-based or place-identified presses. And I love that. I think that's great.
I'm very grateful to Ooligan.
Yay, Ooligan.
Yay, Ooligan. They have a lot of other fantastic books too.
I'm going to jump in and start the Q&A. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Ooligan, Ooligan is a student-run press at Portland State University. They turn out a lot of really great things. We've carried a lot of their stuff here in the store, and they learn from top to bottom how to publish a book. So editing, acquiring, doing the covers, doing the promotion, and that there's not a lot of programs that exist like that in the US. So they kind of have a jump on learning the book business from the publishing side earlier on than other people that might just apply to a publishing house. I've heard really great things from a couple of Portland-based publishers that also have offices in New York, that they really loved the folks that come out of Ooligan Press because they're very professional and they know what they're doing. So that leads into the first question, which is from, I think it's Elle or Ellie. Hi, my question is for Jennifer. What was something that surprised and delighted you about working with a student-run press?
So many things, but I do want to shout out the sensitivity reading process, because this book is inclusive. It's supposed to represent people in a positive way. The last thing I would want to do would be to represent someone in a way that's offensive or doesn't feel real. For example, there's some of the characters have disabilities. There are ethnic variety of characters, and that was great. I really appreciated that they had people with disabilities read the book. They had people who had been adopted read the book. I loved that.
Although I should point out that my friend Janine Cummins, who was savaged over her novel American Dirt, had 9 sensitivity readers.
Oh.
So it's great to have that as a line of defense, but it doesn't always work.
I see. Interesting. Okay.
So the next question is from Benjamin. Will either of you be writing a book about a semester at sea on shipboard?
It would be a great setting for a mystery. So I think it's more likely that you would write it than that I would write it.
I think Hal would get a scholarship to a semester at sea. I think he's highly likely to go. Yeah. And he would probably talk Isaac into going.
Yeah. Okay. It's yours. It's all yours.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can do the sensitivity read as a person who's been on a ship a lot of times.
Yeah. Okay. I will.
The next question is, do you plan to write a sequel to Finding the Vein, something that follows the detective or one of the youth?
Maybe. I don't think that I have a sequel per se, but I do love the characters. I love Mikey. I love Hate Woo. I love Hal and Isaac, and I would like to bring them together. It won't be a sequel that will follow the events at camp exactly, though.
I love that you hate one of your main characters. And by the way, it's great that you didn't fall into the trap, I think, and it is a trap of what I think of as the tyranny of the likable character.
Good.
I've never written a completely likable character. Oh, hello, puppy. Probably never will. So, complicated, difficult, unpleasant people are, they're all around us. They should be in our books too.
Woo is just a bit of a handful.
The next question,
my favorite characters.
So related to that, the next question is: do you have difficulty building a story around two of the detectives?
Yes. So much difficulty. Yes. Is that a long enough answer?
All right, the new question is, or the next question is from Olivia. I had the pleasure of helping to acquire Finding the Vein for Ooligan.
Thank you, Olivia.
The manuscript, what stood out was the characters and the way they came alive on the page. Which character was the most fun to write? I know I have my favorites.
I had a lot of fun writing Hal, especially at the beginning. He almost wrote himself. But I have to say, when I was revising, I really enjoyed spending time with Woo a lot. Probably because he's a bit of a handful. Yeah.
The next question is, Jen, how do your kids feel about the book?
That's a really great question that I cannot answer. They have to answer, and I don't know. One of them is on this call, and if you want to answer it, you should, but no pressure. I don't know how they feel, and I don't. I didn't even tell. I told them that it's completely up to them if they read it, and honestly, I'm not sure if any of them has read it.
All right.
If you tell me their name, we can put them on the spot.
No pressure.
Well, there's yeah. I think I won't do that. That will be my act of parental selflessness for the day.
Next question
is here. Here he is.
Oh, there we go. Here's Sherry.
Hi.
Hi, Harry.
Hi, honey.
Hello.
Harry, have you read your mom's book?
I haven't, actually.
What's holding you back?
I don't know. I'm reading a lot of other books for school right now, and also I kind of knew there was like themes about it that were like pretty similar to my own life. or whatever. Or actually, I don't know because I haven't read it. So I just decided not to.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Well, I don't know if you remember Asher, but Asher's only recently started to read my book. So it's a great thing about a book is it's an object that's in the world and it's going to be there whenever you're ready. It will, not a word will be different from now to whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
I totally get that. I, in college, did not read that much, even though I was known to be a reader in high school. There's a lot of things to read in college. So the next question is from Emily. Do you identify with any individual in the story?
I'm sorry, it's for me?
Yeah.
Oh, do I identify with any individual in the story? I do. I identify with Mikey quite a bit sometimes, and a little bit with the camp nurse, a little bit, and I identify a little bit with probably everybody, but I'd say Mikey feels the most like somebody that could be me.
The next question is from Laurel. How did you decide on the structure for your novel?
How did I decide on the structure? I kind of copied what I think other writers do that I thought was successful. I liked starting with the murder and then going back in time and progressing from there. And I liked shifting I thought I would like shifting. I like reading books where the point of view shifts every chapter. It kind of goes back and forth. So in this book, there's sort of two pairs of detectives. There's the teenage amateur detectives, and then there are the professional detectives. And so I wanted to go back and forth between those 2 points of view, and then surpass the events in the prologue and go to the ending. So I think I was just imitating that genre. That's kind of a normal structure in the genre of crime fiction.
The next question is, what are some things you learned from your career in nursing and applied to your writing?
Well, that's a very good question. Who's that from? Just out of curiosity.
It is actually an anonymous question, so.
An anonymous question.
Yeah.
Well, I learned how to murder people without leaving a mark. No, kidding. Well, a lot. I mean, it's a sort of a medical mystery in a way. But I'm glad somebody asked this because I think that nurses don't get a lot of credit, but we are all detectives. Nurses are always detectives. We're always trying to figure out not only what's happened, what's going on, but beyond that, the meaning of what's going on. Like not only what is happening with my patient, but what is the meaning of this in my patient's life? So that sort of very careful listening, deductive reasoning stuff really informs writing. And of course, as a nurse, I'm privileged to hear people's personal stories all the time, intimate stories. And I don't take those stories and use them, but I mean, it's good for storytelling, the storytelling muscles, I guess.
Have there been any nurse detectives?
Yes.
Well, maybe there's room for another nurse detective. I think that would be a great ongoing character.
Yeah, I can't think of them off the top of my head, of course, because you're asking me on a webinar. But yes, there definitely are. And there's one in particular that's one of the Scandinavian series. And I want to say she's in Denmark. And it's written by a pair of writers. They take turns writing the chapters, which I think is a really interesting way to write. And she's a nurse and she works with refugees. And she gets embroiled in a lot of mysteries. Nina something. Is it Nina Borg? Somebody Google Nina Borg. I think it's Nina Borg.
Well, I think that's a great, opening for, you said you were writing about the nurse in your next book. So
Yes.
I think if that works out, you should maybe have her be a regular protagonist.
Okay, the next question's for Kathy. What's the greatest challenge to writing a mystery? Plot, developing character? Those questions.
Who is Kathy? Oh, it's from Kathy?
It's from Kathy. It's from Kathy to, I believe, Jen. What's the, or it could also be to you. What's the greatest challenge to writing a mystery?
I don't think I've written any mysteries, so.
Oh, I think you have. I mean, in a way. Admission is kind of, I mean, there's a mystery at the heart of admission, but anyway. And you should have known.
Well, I mean, here we get into the whole genre thing. I mean, you could say
it's not genre.
I've heard Pride and Prejudice described as a suspense novel, because if you're in suspense about what's going to happen, then the author's done their job, no matter if there's a crime or whatever. But I can accept that my books, some of them are thrillers, but I'm not that comfortable with the mystery label, because I've never written a book about who did it.
Yeah.
It was, You Should Have Known was made into a whodunit by David E. Kelley, but my book, it was very clear who did it at the beginning. I wasn't that interested in who did it. I was interested in what he left behind. Mm-hmm. So no, I mean, I don't think I have, but I'll take suspense. I'm really happy to take suspense, because I think that's the writer's job, to create suspense.
That's so interesting, because as a bookseller, it's like when you go to order books, the publishers label them as a specific genre, and we don't always agree with what they label them, where they should go in the store. But yeah, they all clump together: mystery, suspense, thriller. And those tend to go in the same sections at a lot of stores, but we have debates about it all the time where we're going to shelve something.
Well, I know that, I've had a long career now, I guess, but it only for the last one or two books have I had a reasonable expectation that I would go into a bookstore and my book would be there, which is very nice development. But sometimes they're in literary fiction and sometimes they're in mystery, thriller, suspense. And, it's baffling to me. But I'm glad that you're debating it on your end, because it's nice to know that, that you don't just accept what they tell you.
Yeah, it's so, and then we make up new sections based on what might be popular at the time. Like, maybe we didn't have this section, or we'll move the section because it's not as popular. It's so fascinating. The bookseller side versus the publisher side versus the writing side they're all different. Okay, so Olivia asked.
I can answer the question about what was the hardest part, though, because I didn't anticipate this myself. And if anyone's thinking about writing a detective story, they should know going in that the timeline is just. I really think I spent the most time on the timeline. Who is where at exactly what time? And you cannot make a mistake, because there's a big hole in it. I was thinking about when my kids used to build Bionicles, those Lego creations, and at the end you can't have any pieces left over where the Bionicle is not going to work. That it's sort of like that. Everything has to fit in the right place, and you just can't make a mistake. So I had paper. I was like Scotch taping pieces of paper together and stretching them out across my living room, my dining room table, and writing, 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m. for all of the days over which the plot takes place.
I used a Google spreadsheet, because in the plot there's a character who has a timeline, but they're a liar. So then there's the real timeline. And there's a fictional adaptation of that person's life. So there's that timeline. And it was very, very complicated. But Google spreadsheet for me.
So this is from Olivia asks, what do you think of the editorial process? Asking for a friend.
I assume she means at Ooligan. Or maybe it's a general question about the editorial process.
I think it might be a general question. Both. Both.
Why don't you take the general one because you have a lot more experience.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you my first experience, which I still kind of think about with kind of shock and awe. Of course, my first published book was not the first book I wrote. The first two books I wrote were rejected everywhere around the world. So when my third novel was finally accepted and it was to become my first published novel, I was so happy to have an editor. I would have, I was completely compliant, and I was thrilled to be in an editorial session with this editor. And I remember went in there and I had my pen, I had my pad, and the first thing she said to me was, cut 100 pages. And I went, bleh. I was like, but okay, I'd waited a long time for this, and she was a very eminent editor. And I said, okay, why? And she said, because it's 100 pages too long. And that was it. That was my first foray with edited. But I remember saying to my aforementioned best friend, my reader, I remember she said to me, you're going to have to cut a subplot. You're not going to be able to nickel and dime 100 pages out of this manuscript. And I said, maybe, but first I'm going to try to do just that. And what I discovered in going through the manuscript was that every paragraph had an extraneous sentence. There was something in there that did not move the story. And I cut that sentence, and I got down about 70 pages from doing that. And the other 30 pages I got from creative type resetting, which you could do in those days without, because there were no word counts. It was all pages. So I cheated. Okay, I cheated. But I never forgot. I mean, that was a really important lesson, that because it's 100 pages too long, she knew that because she'd read and published many, many novels, and I had published 0 novels. And she knew, and it wasn't her job to tell me exactly where to cut. I had to take responsibility for that. And I've done that before I submit a novel at this point. But I love my editor. I have a wonderful editor now, and she tells me, cut it, or it's not working, or I'm not convinced, or it's flabby. I listen to her because she wants the book to be better. And if you have an adversarial attitude, like they're making you do something, you're maybe in the wrong place. So that's my story. What about you?
I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed everything about it. And I was so happy that someone was reading so carefully. I would say to Tom, like, look, they suggested, they found this mistake that I made here. Like, they're really paying attention. Someone is really paying attention to what I wrote. And it was great. I loved it. I loved everything.
Yeah. You feel so clean, like you've been scrubbed, They find your mistakes. They're preventing you from being an idiot or,
yes,
being a character in 2 places at the same time. They pay such close attention. It's a wonderful feeling.
Which is not to say, by the way, that I made every single change that was suggested. And Ooligan, the editors were good about that. They did not, they did not insist. Like there was, it was probably Wu who made a comment that was like, they were like, well, this is kind of off color. It could offend someone. And I was like, well, I know, but it's Wu. Like, that's okay. It can be in there like that. He can phrase it that way because it's very in character, and nobody insisted.
So the next question's from Rachel. Jen, were there any characters that you had particular difficulty writing?
Particular difficulty. I struggled a little with the character of Sophie, who's kind of a cipher, and I'm afraid she sort of remains that way. I'm not sure if that's a bit bad or good, but I did have a little trouble getting into Sophie's head sometimes. Sophie is a camper, a teenage girl camper, who's sort of at the center of some of the drama that takes place. So a little bit, yeah.
The next question's from Katie. What is the biggest takeaway you want readers to have from your book?
That it's completely okay to be a complicated person and just be yourself. You don't have to be one thing. You can be lots of things.
And then our last question here is from Benjamin. Some have said that mysteries satisfy readers because they give the sense that there is meaning in life. Even violent events have an explanation. Do you feel this applies to Finding in the Vein?
Benjamin is so smart. Hi, Benjamin. I don't know if it does. I guess I'd like to ask you that. Do you feel like that is that true of Finding the Vein? I hope so.
At some point, we don't have the answers anymore. It becomes, you've done your work and you've handed your work to the world, and people have to make up their own minds.
Well, thank you, Jean and Jen, for doing this. We're a bit over time, but I thought the questions were really great, and it's really great actually to have a lot of the Ooligan staff in on here. Also, I want to thank Bailey Potter. She helped coordinate a lot of this on my end, and just the Ooligan staff in general, and the campus AV support for supporting Waukoma and setting up the Zoom. If you need a copy of Jen's book, we have signed copies here at the store. You can also pre-order Jean's book. I don't have the actual one yet because it doesn't come out to May, but you can pre-order it, and that always helps authors.
Yeah, it exists.
And then I just want to remind folks that we do have an event next week with Eileen Garvin. She is the author of The Music of Bees. This is not the actual book. This is my advanced reader. She will be in conversation next Tuesday at 6:30 on Zoom, another virtual event with J. Ryan Stradle, who is the author of The Lager Queen of Minnesota. He also wrote, I can't remember. It's The Kitchens of the Midwest. So if you pre-order Eileen's book, she did write some exclusive recipe cards for Waukoma with recipes that have honey in them. So you'll get those with your pre-order. And yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting local authors and general and supporting the bookstore. We really appreciate it, and supporting Ooligan Press. They're a great program at Portland State. I did go there. I also went to Oregon State and U of O. So it's just a really, really great program for publishing, and a great opportunity for people to learn about publishing and how it works. So thank you, you guys.
Where's my champagne? How come I don't?
I also have thank yous I need to spit out too. I really need to thank Bailey Potter, everyone at Ooligan. Jean, thank you very much. I'm going to forget people, so that's all I'm going to say. And everyone else and my family for their support. And the Multnomah Library Writers Project. And my book club. And my cop friends who told me the procedural details. Okay. And Jenny at Waukoma. And Jenny at Waukoma for sure.
Thanks, Jen. And if you did order books, parents are always very important.
Parents are very important. Thanks, Mom. And my kids also, all three of them, who I love so much. Okay, I think I'm done.
Well, thanks again. And if you missed, or you know anybody that missed this, PSU is going to get a recording all set up, and we'll post that in our on our YouTube channel. Yes, Waukoma has a YouTube channel. We're very techie now. And we'll also distribute that information afterwards. So again, thanks a lot to PSU, and thanks, Jen. Congratulations. Yay. And thanks, Jean. I'm really excited about selling your book in our store.
Thank you. I want to come to your store.
I'm excited to read it.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Oh my God.
Oh, Bailey.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Hi. Come on. All these